Welcome to Introduction to Political Science. I think it's our first time to meet uh, through the video, right? I have to apologize first because I had to upload the video much earlier, but I couldn't sleep last night because I had to watch the election result. So I couldn't sleep like until 6 a.m. And I think I finally ready to upload the video. But anyway, I believe you have a wonderful holiday for 2 days, right? Today I wanted to do two things. First, I want to finish up the discussion Plato and Aristotle comparison. So that's what we did last time. And then second, I wanted to finish role of state. So I'll do the two things. First of all, I we have discussed the main idea of Plato and Aristotle, and I sincerely appreciate your participation. So it makes enrich our discussion. Anyway, so let's talk about a little bit more on Aristotle and Plato. So to understand the Plato philosophy, we should understand what's the criticism that Plato has toward democracy, and then the concept of justice. So to understand the concept of justice, we should understand the myth of metal. So how the Plato, looks at a human being. So that's the actually major difference between Aristotle and Plato. So Plato, ideal city, the republic, is the each citizen contributes his own work for the common use of all, right? So everyone was born with different capacity and ability or characteristics. So they have to work based on their virtue or based on their nature. That's the city's virtue, right? And but in a democracy, even people who was born with iron, they also become a ruler. So that is a meddling and exchange among the three classes. That's what Plato's idea. That's a justice. So justice city is each citizen work and or contributes based on their nature. And for Plato, democracy is unjust, right? Because people do not their own work, and it's because in a democracy society, everyone can be a ruler and everyone can rule the society. But in an ideal city, there is a ruler, and then it's ruled by philosopher king. So philosopher king should rule the society because he or she can access the truth, right? But we still could find the democratic value from Plato. The first value is woman's right. So the Plato granted that men and a woman are different in many ways, but still woman can be a guardian. Woman can be rulers because they have the same capabilities that men has. That's actually the uh, so many scholars can consider Plato as a first feminist. That's the side of uh, democratic value that Plato has. The second is education. So opportunity for everyone to be educated. That's the second thing. So Plato believed that children should be raised and educated by society as a whole, but there must be no discrimination just because of their biological parents. So some parents or both maybe were iron, but their babies can be born with silver or gold. So we can miss the chance by that. So that's why two these babies, all babies in the society should be raised and educated by society as a whole. That's the second democratic values that we can find from Plato. Let's then move to Aristotle. So Aristotle give a lot of justifications uh, that democracy is not a bad regime type, right? So Aristotle thinks that the humans are social and political creature. So if he's right, so if we think that humans are social and political creature, then we can actually participate in politics because it's just human nature, right? So he gives a lot of justification or right reasons for people to participate in politics. But differently from Plato, we can find a lot of undemocratic values from Aristotle. The first thing is he was very sexist and the racist. He thinks that women are not a rational creature and slavers are not human. So some people are naturally slavery. So we should exclude these people. Only men can participate in politics. So he tried to bolster uh, the beauty or virtue of democracy, but still he fails in some ways because of these two reasons, right? But to understand Aristotle, that is different from Plato, right? We should understand happiness because he thinks that humans' major goal is to be happy, right? And how can be happy? According to Aristotle, we can be happy by using our reason. So how can we use our reason? So we can participate in deliberation or decision-making process. So throughout this deliberation or decision-making process, we can use our reason and we can make decisions based on this deliberative process. And then in a process, we can actually distinguish what is the good, the bad, the advantages, disadvantages, right? So that is actually different from Plato as well. So Plato thinks that only philosopher can access the truth, but Aristotle doesn't think like that way toward the truth. And if you look at Aristotle actually divided the regime type into six based on how many people can be a ruler and then how the system works uh, for the common interest or for the interest of the ruler. So if the system works for the common interest, we can consider this system as good. But if the system works only for the interest of the ruler, then we can consider these political regimes are not good regime, right? But that's kind of ironic because we could find a lot of justifications or justifiable reasons that democracy is not a bad regime type from Plato, but still he put democracy as a bad regime type or corrupted regime type. It's because he thinks that there is always possibility for country to become extreme democracy. So democracy are polarized society in terms of wealth. So there are the rich people and there are the poor people. So there's always possibility the many is actually the poor. These poor people can exploit the wealth from the rich people. That's the he was mainly cautious about. And he thinks that Aristotle thinks that the best regime type is not democracy but polity. What's the main difference of polity and between polity and the democracy? So he thinks that the polity has a lot of middle class. So here, thus it is manifest that the best political community is formed by citizens of the middle class, and that those states are likely to be well administered, in which the middle class is larger and larger, if possible, than both the other classes. So if the middle class is large enough, then they can balance between the poor and the rich. So there is less likely that the poor people can exploit the wealth from the rich. That's the what Aristotle's arguments. And let's next is so he actually Aristotle likes democracy, but he doesn't what he doesn't really like is extreme democracy. So extreme democracy is the many can exploit the wealth from the rich. That's the extreme democracy that Plato didn't like. And let's compare these two guys. So, how these two are different in terms of um, considering the human beings. The Plato should we should understand human being by Plato myth of the metal, right? So Plato thinks that every man, every people, or every citizen is different because they have different capacity. And then, but Aristotle's human beings are citizens here. I mean, Plato doesn't think that everyone is citizen. So citizen is democracy citizen. So it's a little bit different. And then all humans belong to one of the myths of metals, right? And then for Aristotle, slaves are women are excluded, and all humans, including even women, belong to one of the metals, and even women can be rulers. So that's the we think that that's the democratic values that Plato has, and we should understand Plato better by understanding concept of justice. So justice means people do their own jobs, right? Uh, in that case, the meddling and mixing is not allowed. And the Aristotle, we should understand a pursuit of happiness, right? So how can we be happy by using our reason? And the Plato truth, something we should understand. The truth is that something we can't access easily, right? The truth, something we should born to understand the truth for Plato. But Aristotle, we should understand the collective intellectuals, right? So maybe one or a few people can be superior to the others, but if normal people collectively think, then it can be superior to one or few. So he trusted in, or he believed in collective intellectuals. And Plato doesn't think that human beings are equal, but Aristotle believes the equality is a good concept for people. And the Plato, so that's why Plato thinks that the philosopher king should rule the society, but for Aristotle, political men should rule the society. So that's the major difference between the two. Government, Plato thinks that democracy is bad, but Aristotle thinks that extreme democracy is bad. But Aristotle thinks that polity is the best regime type, right? And then the best regime type for Plato is aristocracy, that is ruled by philosophy. Aristotle thinks that polity is the best regime type. And then Plato understands that democracy is ruled by the many. So Plato doesn't really put the wealth here, right? But Aristotle is different because he actually inserted the concept of the wealth to the system of democracy. So Plato just understand that democracy is ruled by the many, right? And then the violence, he was very cautious that there is strong violence uh, posed by the many, right? So he didn't like democracy because the many have power. But Aristotle is different because the many is poor. That's the problem, right? So if the many is not poor, then the problem will be significantly decreased for concept of Aristotle. So the democracy is ruled by the poor, and he thinks that to overcome this weakness, we should understand we need wisdom of the ruler, right? That's philosopher. But Aristotle trust in, believed in wisdom of the crowd, the collective intellectual. Plato never liked it. I mean, we couldn't find any sentence that Plato likes democracy. Maybe we can find some supporting argument these days to support democracy, but we can't actually find that he likes the democracy, right? But Aristotle, we can find a lot of supportive arguments from Aristotle. So, but I put partly supportive because he didn't like extreme democracy. So he still regarded the democracy as a bad regime type, one of the bad regime type. And we can still find commonality. I wasn't sure we should do it, we should know this or not, but so there I think that both scholars, both Aristotle and Plato, thinks that in terms of knowledge or how can we approach the knowledge may be different, but knowledge itself has a commonality. The first knowledge must be of what is real. So if you understand the Plato, the released man actually went outside and he saw the reality. So knowledge is something what is real for Plato. And then Aristotle is the same, right? Because Aristotle that we can actually apply the knowledge in a deliberate process in the real society. So that's there. From that perspective, knowledge must be of what is real for both Aristotle and Plato. And knowledge must be of what is fixed and unchanged. If knowledge is something changeable or something changed every time, then we cannot distinguish what is right, what is just, right? The world experience via sense is what is real, and human need to do something that is necessary. And democracy, a divideism, that means democracy is not good reason for both scholars. That's the commonality, but it was really hard to find the commonalities between the two. So if you can find anything else besides this, so please let me know. Then we can discuss still. That's what I found, that these two philosophers share same commonalities, at least in terms of knowledge. Okay, then I wanted to start our new discussions on role of state. Hold on. So we talked about last time. We actually watched the video together, right? So we watched the video, the Seo Ferry documentary films. So we discussed a little bit whether that disaster, tragedy, is the fault of Park Geun-hye. So can we ask? Uh, can we say she's guilty in terms of the self-ferry movement? I asked that question, or is that question valid? Whether we should ask whether that question is valid or not, and then to know whether that question is valid or not, we should understand what is state and then what is role of state. So that's what I wanted to cover mainly today. State, since this class is in English, so we use state. When I say state, it doesn't mean state in the United States, right? In the United States, we have a lot of states, different states. That is different from what I'm saying. State in here, I exchangeably use nation or country, but I do not use nation or country much. But instead of nation or country, I use state usually. It's because state is more kind of political term. When I say state, it's actually pointed to the government, politicians, or the administrative. So it is a little bit different country or nation. So when we say country, it's more like a geographical thing. So when we say nation, it's more about like symbolic kinds of things. So that's why many scholars actually prefer the word state instead of nation and country. Maybe instead of state, I can use maybe the government, right? So I can say 윤석열 government or Obama government or Obama administrative or administration, Obama administration, or but we don't say Obama state. It's a little bit weird because sometimes state something contain something not changeable, right? But when I mean the president can be changed, right, based on the term, but uh, civil officers, they some civil officers they do not change even though the president has been changed. So we do not. But I can say a little bit instead of state. I can say a little like administrative administration or the government, right? But a state is more broader term than state, the government or administrative. So, but if you say in Korean, state 국가, 정부 뭐 이런 걸 의미합니다. So, but state is more commonly used in political science. And if you say nation, so a nation is a large group of people who are bound together and recognize a similarity among themselves because of a common culture. In particular, a common language seems important in creating nationhood. So nation, if you say nation, then you usually talk about a group of people, right? Group of people, and then this group of people has a similarity. Maybe similarity in terms of ethnicity, religion, or language, right? So it says common cultures. Culture is very important, and culture contains a lot of things, right? So it's not easy to define a one sentence or one thing. So sometimes, even though you live in the same country, you use different languages. So language common using common language doesn't necessarily means you are in the same nation, right? It's a difference. So bounded culture actually have a lot of aspects: religion, shared history, or common language, shared same identity. But at least if you say you are in the same nation, then you should have at least you should share same history, right? Or same identity. The identity means here that you should identify yourself as a certain citizen of the nation. So let's say I am Korean. I can say that because I can use Korean, right, as a language. But my religion might be very different from you, right? Because I'm a Buddhist. I'm a Buddhist and I believed in Buddhism, but I couldn't find Buddhist these days, but in terms of religion, you and I may be different. But we share the same identity, which means you identify yourself as a Korean, and I identify myself as a Korean too. So that's a boundary, right? So that's you and I are bounded together. Maybe not for international students, but international students, if you share I mean, if you from Bangladesh or Uzbekistan, Germany, Bulgaria, then you may have you inside of your country. You may have different. Your country may be composed of different ethnicity or ethnicity, but you at least inside of your country, these people identify themselves as Bangladeshian or Bulgarian, German, like that way, right? Or at least you understand each other. You use same language. A country, especially when thought about large people living in one area with their own government, language, tradition. So country, nation usually are same, but if you say country, it's more like geographic kind of contain, right? So it's like that. But if you say just culture, not enough condition for to say you are in the same nation because as you can see, like Japan, South Korea, China, we share a very similar culture in terms of Confucianism, but it doesn't necessarily mean that these three countries are the same, right? And this very right map shows the religion thing and culture, right? But many country here, especially Middle East, African country, they share the same religion, but it doesn't necessarily they are the same nation. So nation it can be defined actually culture, common language, same identity, share the history, share the tradition, right? A state. State is a more political term, political unit that has ultimate sovereignty. So when I say state, then state contains the concept of sovereignty. So that is a political unit that has ultimate responsibility for the conduct of its own affairs. That is sovereignty. So that means sovereignty, let's say it's like this. I say to be a nation, you need people, right? And territory and sovereignty. That the three things should be met. So, for instance, if I say in my room, there is territory, right? Rent, and then if I say I designate myself, this is Hyubin's world. So, country name is Hyubin, and I'm using Korean, even though I'm using Korean, can I just argue that this is my territory and this is nation? But it's impossible, right? Because sovereignty is something recognized by other countries. So if other country recognize that country as a country, or that state as a state, it's because they have sovereignty. And sovereignty is not something from inside only. It should be something from outside. So other countries should be recognize a certain state as a state. That's sovereignty. Sovereignty is something you can do whatever you want within the one territory. So like when we criticize China, because when we criticize China, we criticize like, oh, you guys violate human rights. Whenever we criticize like that, or whenever we criticize North Korea, then we criticize like, oh, you guys do not uphold human right, or you guys violate human right. Then whatever, whenever we criticize like that way, these two countries response are exactly the same. They say that it's our thing. I mean, it's not your business. It's our inward kind of problem, right? It's they can argue like that because they have ultimate sovereignty. The both country, North Korea and China, they both are sovereign countries, so we can't actually get involved within a domestic matter. That's the sovereignty. So sovereignty is the ultimate authority in the decision-making process of the state. So state can do whatever they want within their territory, and then they have right not to be intervened by other country. That's the sovereignty. Sovereignty is something we can't actually touch on. So sovereigns rule territory, and they should not be interfered with by other sovereigns. So that's why the China or North Korea, they can argue that even though they violate human rights, it's not your problem. So that's sovereignty. They have ultimate sovereignty, ultimate authority based on their territory, within their territory. So like Texas, they have their own territory, right? For instance, if you go to United States, I have lived in Texas, Austin, for 3 years. And then the Texan people wanted, not now, but wanted to be independent from the United States. They have their own even flag, and then they have territory. And Texas is very huge territory. I mean, Texas is bigger, much bigger than South Korea. And they have language, they have people, they want to be independent, but they couldn't. And then we do not recognize Texas as a nation, government, state because it lacked of stability. So we can't recognize it, right? We do not recognize it. So Texas is regarded as one of the states in the United States, right? But not as a nation or country. The autonomous state can participate autonomously in political conflict and decision making. So every state is autonomous. Autonomous in Korean 자유적이라는 거야. 자기 마음대로 할 수 있는 권리가 있다라는 거죠. Autonomous states can participate autonomously in political conflict and decision making. What does that mean? So you have autonomy, you are autonomous, or you have autonomy. That means in Korean 자율적. Then you can actually decide when you want to wage a war against a certain country. That's the most important actually aspect in international society. So state matters because why we have to care about other states, because we never know that states whether the state wage a war against our country or not, right? Cooperation is later things, don't you think? I mean, in international society, we, according to this definition, the definition of a state, we can actually intervene in the domestic politics. That means in international society, we should see that in a different way, right? That why state matters in international society, because they have they are autonomous. So they can't actually decide whenever they want. Whenever they want to wage a war, they will wage a war against other countries. So why we have to care whether North Korea starve that much, because we are not sure whether North Korea dropped the nuclear bomb in any other country in the world, right? They can do that because they are autonomous. They are sovereign country. Government is a key part of state. So I said sometimes we use language state, government, administrative like that way, but still I told you that the state is much broader concept, because inside of state there is government. And the government is a group of people who have ultimate authority to act on behalf of the state. So when we say a nation, then there is territory, people, government, and if there is government, that means actually they also have sovereignty, and then the sovereignty is recognized by other country, right? So, for instance, when Japan colonized Korea, we have interim government already in China. At the time, we couldn't establish our interim government in Korean territory, but instead of it, we actually established our own interim government in China. But so we had everything, right? Government, people, our own language, territory, but we didn't have sovereignty. So that's why at the time, during the Japanese colonization, South Korea was not complete nation, was not complete states. Okay, that's the concept of state. Then we should understand the role of state. So, I mean, to what extent the state should do? That's actually main question in these countries in these days. Before the COVID-19, we demand smaller states, but because the outbreak of COVID-19, we realized we may need bigger states, because there are a lot of roles that bigger states should do. One of the roles the during the COVID-19 pointed out is that they should protect from illness too, right? So it wasn't really a government's role before, but it became the government role. So role of government are more likely to be expanded than ever compared to before the COVID-19. But there's always questions to what extent government should play a role. That's the actual always that will be the always the main question in political science. But the first thing I want you to point out is device to provide public good. That's the concept that we should understand. The public good is something that benefits all members of a community, but no one can be prevented from using. That's the definition of public good. In Korean, it's 공공재. What is public goods? So, for instance, if you look at the first picture, it's infrastructure, right? So it's a road. So who built the road? The government. We think that it's so easy to answer the question, who built the infrastructure or the highway, that we can easily answer as government. But why government should build this road for us? It's because we consider this is public good. So once, even though, I mean, is there anyone who contribute to build the construction of the road? Actually, I believe no one would, right? But is there anyone who can be excluded from using it? No one. Everyone can use our road. So you walk on the street, right? I mean, that's actually the road. That's the what they built for us, but we do not pay and we didn't contribute at all. But we still enjoy using it. That's the characteristics of public good. I will study, give more details to you. What is public good? And second is peace. So some Korean students might say, "Oh, I serve for the country," right? I mean, that's their contribution. So you guys actually contribute to the peace, but even though you do not contribute to peace, but you still enjoy its peaceful nation, right? Is it because the characteristics of public good? Even though you do not contribute, you are not excluded from using it. That's the public good. Who should provide this public good? The government. The third picture I wanted to show environment. Like clean energy, clean water, clean air, kind of things. I mean, how can I stop using the clean air, even though I didn't do anything? I mean, I pay actually Greenpeace a little bit, but I'm not sure how much it helped. But you guys do not pay at all, but you still use fresh air, right? I mean, that's the characteristic of public good. Let me show the core principle of public good. So how this concept actually came from. So the question we should answer to understand the public good is we should answer, how can a group such as two or more countries serve its collective interest? Well, we can change the questions later. How can a group such as one or two people or such as two or more people serve its collective interest when doing so requires its members to forego their individual interests? That's the questions of actually public good. So for instance, there are a group of people, right? Like, let's say we have project. We should work on project, and then there are 5 people there. Then there is always free rider, right? And how can we prevent the free rider problems, but still everyone can contribute? That's the main thing. I mean, that's the actually collective good, or we can say that's public good. Collective goods and public goods are actually the same. So let's say these 5 people work together. All 5 people, they work together. They contribute. Then we call this result is collective goods. But even though if you work on project, then you usually get the same grade from professor, right? Even though there are 1 or 2 didn't contribute at all. Maybe some people might say to the professor, then we can actually detect who is the defector. But if you don't say anything, then the professor will give this exactly the same grade to 5 people. That's actually the collective good problem. So public good problems. So how can we solve this problem? There are a lot of different ways to solve this problem. So based on this solving the problem, the collective good problems actually came out, and the one of the good way to solve the collective problem is you should choose main one who contribute. That's actually the government. I mean, think about anarchical situation, right? And then there are a lot of people, and there are weak people and strong people, and then everyone is afraid of whenever they are attacked. So they collectively act together, right, to peaceful environment, right? But if but how can we make everyone contribute to the peace? Because some people might not help, right? Or some people, uh, even though they contribute, it doesn't really help, right? And but if we make a government, then government can provide this collective good, and government can actually collect goods from each individual. And if one person doesn't contribute, then government can punish. So we give that power to the government to solve these collective action problems, collective good problem. So we can call this free rider problem, collective good problem, paradox of collective goods, or public good problems. How can we make everyone contribute to serve its collective interest? Right. Collective good problem is produced because of the characteristics of collective good. Collective goods problem is the characteristic number one is not excludable. That means even though you don't contribute at all, but you are not excluded from using it. So like fresh air, fresh water, even though you don't do anything to maintain fresh air or fresh water, but you can still enjoy using it, right? So it's shared by everyone. But how about private good? What is private good? Private good is something you should pay, like a cell phone. You pay, right? So if you don't pay, then you are excluded. You can't use cell phone if you can't pay. That's actually the private good. So the private good, no problem. There is no problem like that because you should pay like membership. So like if you pay certain membership, if you pay, then you can actually share the goods, group goods, right, by contributors. That's actually private good. And collectible goods second characteristic is non-rivalry. Non-rivalry means you don't have to fight for it. So one person doesn't decrease availability. That means let's say I use clean water today. So even though I use clean water today, it doesn't mean that the other persons cannot use mine because that's the characteristics of collective goods. So like peace, how can I decrease availability even though I use it, right? So that's the characteristic of non-rivalry. Since because these two characteristics, non-excludable and non-rivalry, collective goods, there is problem of collective goods. And private good is library. Some of them are library, not all, but yeah, like every goods are limited. So for instance, I wanted to buy a cell phone, but sometimes the cell phone is limited, right? Even though you have money. So and then that means if I have money, so I bought it my cell phone, but the other person doesn't have money, then they can't buy. So that's kind of a liability too. So uh, if you compare the collective good to private goods, then you can actually understand a lot easier the characteristics of public goods or collective goods. So collective goods is like national defense, safety, security, pure air, water kind of things. And private goods are house, car, food kind of things. So government is necessary because we need someone who can provide this collective goods, right? collective goods problems are actually pervasive in everywhere in like world peace, environmental issues. We always face collective action problems. So, like for instance, every country wants to stop global warming, but individual country is more interested in using fossil fuels for economic growth. So if you look at international society, then there is always free riders, right? So for instance, like world peace, every country wants to be protected, but individual country does not want to contribute to it. So for instance, like if you look at UN force, then who pay most? The United States. But uh, thanks to the United States share, other countries can enjoy world peace, right? So there is always free rider problems in international society, but domestic politics, it's just so easy, right? Because there is government, and government actually can make each individual to contribute. So how can I contribute? I pay taxes. You guys, some students, you guys pay taxes too, right? So if you pay tax, that means you contribute. So you do not contribute directly to the problems, but government, if you pay taxes, then government works for us. That's actually the contribution. But even though you don't pay taxes, some people can pay taxes, right? But these people can still enjoy using it because it's public good. So how can we solve the problem? So if in a small group, there is no problem at all. So cheating is harder, easier to punish. So let's say there are only 5 people, right? Then we actually know who is the free rider. So how can you solve the problem if there is a free rider? You can just tell that to the professor, right? I mean, you can easily detect who is cheater. So you can just tell the professor, and then the professor will punish instead of you. So if it is in a small group, then collective goods are easily made. It's easy to achieve, but in a large group, there are 3 ways to solve the problem. So like dominance, so there's strong people or strong states who push to contribute. Or reciprocity, so there is reward or punishment. If you contribute, then there will be reward. If you defect, then there will be punishment. Identity, so like you can share the same identity. Let's say like there is Islamic Brotherhood in Middle East country or Central Asia or African countries. So they actually share the same identity, which is Islamic belief, right? So since they share the same identity, they can help each other. How they produce public goods among themselves. That's the identity. Identity is the cheapest way to actually to achieve collective goods or solve collective goods problem. So government's main role is to provide public good. Then to what extent public good is? That's actually the question that we should ask.